Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
A husband noticed suspicious behavior in his wife, decided to see what she was doing, and saw this. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Is adultery a mortal sin? The rational part of my brain knows that this is not true. However, if I had had a gun in my hand when I saw my wife and her lover walk into the hotel room, it might well have been so. Luckily, by the time I got to my car, I had calmed down and only glanced at the center console where it was stored. I occasionally have large amounts of cash at work and keep a .357 revolver in my car just in case. I've only shot it at the range, but I like guns and have the right to keep them, so why not? I called my boss and told him everything that happened, saying that I would take the day off today and probably tomorrow too. I needed to hire a lawyer and develop a plan of action. I withdrew $3,000 from our joint account and opened a new one in my name, leaving $5,000 in our joint account to cover that month's rent and bills. We only had one emergency credit card, so I called and canceled it. We switched to a month-to-month lease so there would be no problems with the house. We didn't have children either. There was no forgiveness for her, especially after I found out this was the fourth or fifth time. At least the fourth time she had reserved a room on a credit card. I looked at the account online and saw these expenses, then saw that she transferred money from the bank account to cover them. As long as there was no debt on the card at the end of the reporting period, a paper notification would not have been received. The emails about the account came to her, so if I hadn't checked the balance, I would never have known. It's funny, if it hadn't been for the glitch that caused my debit card to not work yesterday, I would never have checked our balance. If I hadn't checked my balance, I wouldn't have seen the credit card charge. If I hadn't seen the credit card payment, I wouldn't have checked yesterday's spending. If I hadn't checked my expenses, I wouldn't have known that I needed to be at the hotel today. If I had not been at the hotel today, I would not have discovered my unfaithful wife. I knew I should have said something last night, but my mind was still trying to process the fact that she might be cheating. Now I had proof, it was time to act. I checked online and found a lawyer who specializes in divorce. I told him my story and was pleasantly surprised. We were only married for 4 years, so I could probably get away with minimal alimony. She's been working a well-paying job for the past 6 months, which is why we switched to a month-to-month lease. We wanted to buy a house, that's what I thought, anyway. Who knows what was on her mind? After all this, I returned home and grabbed a beer. Then it finally hit me, I love this fool. Why did she do this to me? What did I do wrong? I realized that if I sat still, I would just wallow in self-pity. So I took some tape and started walking around the house, putting tape on things I wanted to keep. These were mainly my gaming systems, TV, and exercise equipment. Everything else was connected with memories of us, and it was too painful. As I wandered around, I came up with creative ways to get back at them. I even came up with the idea of leaving her locked in a snow hut without food or clothing, and having his legs broken in the forest so that scavengers could eat him. I realized I might be going too far, especially when I added the idea of giving him a gun with one bullet that wouldn't fire, so when he decided to shoot himself, he would only hear a click. Yes, I'd gotten to this point. Then I realized that in real life, things don't always work out the way they do in stories, so it's better to just divorce her and move on. I was upset because I thought Gwen would be the woman I would grow old with and have kids with. It seemed like every memory came back, my proposal in the theater where we met for the first time on a blind date, a 3-day weekend in Myrtle Beach, sitting with her as her father died of cancer, a long conversation about deciding to move away from our friends so I could get this job, our wedding night. All of those memories were now superimposed on the image of her laughing and holding some other guy's hand as they kissed and opened the hotel room door. My reverie was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. "Julian, what are you doing at home?" she asked, running up to me to hug me. I put the sofa between us and just looked at her. There was nothing to indicate that she cheated today, but that's not surprising. "Stop lying, Gwen. I know you're sleeping with one of your coworkers, so I suggest you start putting tags on what you want to take. You'll be served with the divorce papers on Wednesday." Her reaction was unexpected. She looked almost relieved. "I'm so sorry, Julian. I should never have gone behind your back." "You deserve the truth," she said quietly. "Sorry for cheating or sorry for getting caught?" I asked bitterly. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I wasn't happy. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to ask for a divorce a couple of months ago when I decided I wanted to leave. You deserved so much more from me, she said, tears filling her eyes. Have you been sleeping with him for months now? I couldn't hold back my loud voice, filled with anger and pain. No, we've only met 5 times in the last couple of weeks, she sighed. But I've been wanting to leave the marriage for the last 6 months. What? Why? I asked. My world seemed to shift by 5 degrees. Because I'm 25 and I don't want to come home at 10 p.m. if I'm having fun with my friends. I don't want to worry about drinking too much and possibly offending your boss at the Christmas party. If I see a pair of shoes that I don't need or can't afford, I want to be able to buy them without feeling like I'm taking money away from our future children's college fund, she responded with some warmth. So you've decided to stop being an adult? You want to go back to your carefree early 20s? Well, you got it. I took half of our savings. I'm taking my name off the rent tomorrow. I took an extra $75 for a disease test. We had a night last Sunday, and I'm sure you were with him before. I can't count on you to care enough about me. You want freedom, you got it. Enjoy your life with new friends and a new job. No matter how hard I tried to remain calm, I could not contain my anger. Yes, I was barely 21 when we got married. We both missed out on a lot. At the time, I thought I liked it, but now I'm not so sure. Going out with Jeremy and his friends reminded me of the fun times we once had, just talking and doing stupid things, she said, rather defensively. What part of a wasted life includes cheating on me? What part of a wasted life makes this acceptable? I thought. If nothing else, at least we're friends. Friends don't betray each other like that. You're really good, you know that? I thought my mother and sister were just bad examples, but apparently, all women are just walkers. Okay, I had to stop screaming. Gwen winced a little when I thought about my mom and sister. Mom's betrayal drove my father out the door and into the bottle. 2 years after his departure, he died from alcohol poisoning. Mom was only angry that the child support checks stopped coming. What little was left of Dad went to my sister and me, and Mom took it and spent it on new breasts and a tummy tuck. She put my sister Adrienne on medication and told her that if she was going to get pregnant, she should get pregnant by a rich man so she would be ready. Adrienne managed to seduce Tony Winger, the son of Arnold Winger, owner of the Winger car dealership. When she was 21, she found herself pregnant. Tony heard the rumors and asked her to do a DNA test while the baby was still in the womb. It turned out he was not the father and abandoned her. She decided to get rid of the pregnancy cheaply to solve the problem and contracted a blood infection. 2 days later, she died at home. My mom tried to sue the doctor, but apparently, my sister signed forms that made going to court very expensive. When she found out that trying to get any money would cost more than $10,000, Mom gave up on it all. The next year was pure hell for me as I tried to finish school with good enough grades to maybe get a partial scholarship and avoid dealing with the men my mom brought home. I considered college dorms a lifesaver. No place could be worse than home. A month into student life, 2 local police officers visited me. They pulled me out of class and told me that my mother had died in a car accident. Apparently, she and her boss had a date at noon, and they ran into his angry wife. They jumped into his car and sped straight into the grill of a garbage truck. I was able to get most of my money back from college for the semester because I had to leave to sort things out. No matter how trashed it was, we had a house paid for. Mom had a car, and amazingly, she had a 401k with almost $100,000 in it. There were $300 in the savings account. I also found a stash of money, almost $9,000. I wasn't surprised at all. I spent a month cleaning and completing paperwork. I sold the house, put the money in the bank, and went back for the winter semester. I lived as frugally as I could and did nothing but schoolwork. I graduated in the top 25 of my class and found a job as a manager at an up-and-coming construction company. I went to a bar with a group of guys, and that led to a group of girls coming over to us. My attitude softened to such an extent that I thought maybe there was a decent woman out there. I thought I hit the jackpot when I met Gwen on a blind date. I was a couple of years older than her, but I thought she was pretty cool. The ink on her accounting degree was still damp, but she had found a rewarding job with the state police in forensics. I thought I had a life. It turns out that all women are trash. Gwen was starting to really cry, and this immediately made me angry. She decides she wants out of our marriage, stabs me in the back, cheats on me with another guy, and then she feels bad? Hell no. I literally felt something burst inside me. I suddenly didn't care. You will be served on Wednesday at noon at work. I noted that I wanted to be picked up from the apartment. There will be no things tomorrow. You leave your car and I'll leave mine. My name is on the lease, and at the end of the month, after the first of the month, it will be yours if you want it. I took half the money from the account. I want the credit card paid off and canceled. I don't plan on this getting nasty, mainly because I don't want to see her lying fifth place again. I took a deep breath. I had to calm down because I was starting to repeat myself. Tell your boy toy to stay away from me. I know he was just taking advantage of an available woman, so I'm not going to hunt him down, but if he crosses my path, I'll take him down. Not because you're worth anything, but because a real man does not hunt a married woman. Someone needs to teach him a lesson, and if he crosses my path, I'll be happy to show him. If it's not me, it will be the husband of the next married woman he decides to sleep with. I grabbed the bags I had packed and walked past her. I'll pick up the things that have duct tape on them tomorrow while you're at work. If you want to fight this, take down the tape and I will put it in the divorce papers so the judge can make a decision. I said, walking out the door. She didn't resist the divorce at all. When my mother died, I put all the money from the sale of her house and other property into a trust. My accountant told me that as long as all my money was in a trust, it would not count towards my net worth for student aid. She also suggested that I invest the money so that it wouldn't just sit there. It turns out she was wrong. The money held in trust counts towards the financial aid calculation, at least in the way she arranged it. A year later, she went out of business, another example of how stupid women are. Since all the trust funds were tied to investments, it was faster to take out student loans. Her mismanagement left me with about $13,000 in student debt. Luckily, my company had a program that paid off $15,000 a year towards student loans. I'll be okay. However, the end effect of this disastrous relationship with my accountant was overall positive. While the trust didn't protect me from student aid, it did protect me from getting divorced because I never got around to naming Gwen as trustee. There was about $600,000 that she couldn't touch. I moved out of my apartment and found a small furnished loft close to work. I didn't want anything to do with her, so I left everything to my lawyer. Later, there was some discussion about my 401k, and to make things easier and cut it short, I wrote her a check for $15,000 and left. The reason why she didn't ask for any support became apparent after all the dust had settled. This stupid woman got pregnant and was planning a summer wedding. I think all that whining about not wanting to be tied down was just talk. The following year, I immersed myself in my work and was rewarded with a new position. I was now the improvement assessment coordinator for the entire company. We bought out a number of small companies, and my task was to make them more efficient. I was sent all over the country and tasked with getting new companies in order. My nickname was Axeman, mainly because the first thing I wanted to do was dump the dead weight. Most of these companies had employees who had been there for 10 or 15 years and were not doing their jobs. I would give them one chance to put it into action, and if they didn't, they would leave. I found that generally, employees who had been there for less than 10 years were willing to make the changes necessary to keep their jobs. I knew I wasn't targeting more senior employees, but I ended up getting a reputation for coming in and cutting off senior employees. Both management and the hourly staff considered me an outcast, and I didn't care. I wasn't there to make friends, I was there to make the company money. The bills won't be paid with rainbows and butterflies. As for my personal life, in the first year, I was disgusted by women. I hadn't found a single woman worth a damn in my life, so I tried to wine and dine them. I had a lot of money and traveled a lot, so I decided that I could help support the oldest profession in the world. What was that quote? You don't pay a prostitute for intim, you pay her to leave. This describes my life perfectly. I would go into town, do my own thing, and on the last day, I would either meet a high-class call girl or use the services of a discreet escort. The intimate was usually top-notch, and we both knew what to expect from each other. I should have done this all along. This relationship? I had no idea what the hell I married was up to, and I didn't care. I guess this is where I should say that I went to counseling and worked through my issues with Gwen and women in general. Nope. I think counseling is great for those who can benefit from it, but I didn't really have the desire to change. I enjoyed a variety of women with no strings attached. I kept most of my salary and found something I really enjoyed, restoring old motorcycles. I moved an hour away a long time ago and bought a nice big house on the outskirts of a small town. It was a huge building with an old 1969 Triumph Bonneville in the garage. I had stipulated that the garage would be cleaned out before closing, but apparently, the old owner was too busy to do that. According to the purchase agreement, I owned everything in the building at the time of ownership. The old bike was partially disassembled, but I liked its lines. I bought an expensive Mac toolkit and got to work. I was able to get the bike 75% restored when the owner tried to come and take it from me. We went around and around, but the basic fact was that he gave it up, and it became mine. I gave him $500 to transfer ownership to me. It was easier than fighting in court. After that was done, I came across a 1963 BSA Gold Star Spitfire that needed some attention. I was hooked. I was by no means a professional, but I was getting more interested. I should have sold the bike and then bought a new project bike, but that didn't happen. I ended up with a nice collection of restored vintage motorcycles. So, I was divorced for 7 years. I had a lot of money in the bank, a job I was good at, a rewarding hobby, and any woman I could pay for. I was damn pleased, until I came home with a new throttle cable for my latest purchase and found an old, beat-up Toyota sedan in my driveway. As I drove around, I saw a woman get out of the car. I jumped out and found myself almost face-to-face with my ex. Jules, if there was any way to avoid this, you would never see me again. I did you wrong, and although I feel terrible about it, I can't go back and change it no matter how much I want to. But this is not for me, this is for our daughter. She said hastily, handing me a photo of a cute little girl with a big smile, missing a couple of baby teeth. It looked like the photo was taken in a shopping mall downtown or something like that. She was charming, a sweetheart. It's a pity that her mother is such a party girl. What are you trying to achieve by saying she's mine? Hell, as much as you cheated at the end of our marriage, it could have been anyone. I heard that the Fifth Fleet was in the city around that time, I replied. She sighed. Julian, do whatever you want with me. I know I really screwed up. I've been a real shitty person, and I deserve everything you have to say to me. But our daughter has leukemia and needs a bone marrow donor. It's too dramatic to say she'll die without it. All other options have been exhausted. She's on the donor list, but it could take years, and she only has months. As for how I know she's yours, Jeremy can't have children, and you were the only person I had an intimate with besides him. Go ahead and hate me. Most of the time, I hate myself. If you want to drag me inside and hit me a few times, go ahead. Please get tested and see if you are the father. By this point, she was crying. I wasn't impressed. So you want me to undergo an invasive procedure to help a daughter who may or may not be mine, but was raised by another man, the man who was there for her first steps, her first words, her first lost tooth. Moments I missed because you couldn't figure out who you slept with and at what time. Did you even tell her about me? Would this little girl even be able to pick me out of a lineup, even if I were her biological father? This title belongs to the man who was next to her. By the way, where's that little cuckold? I thought you guys must have fallen in love as quickly as you got married after stabbing me, I replied. I noticed a sad expression appear on her face. Jeremy left us when he found out he was not her biological father. His parents bullied him into taking the test, and he came back without any common markers. It turns out he can't have children and has probably been like this his whole life. I don't miss him one bit, but it breaks my heart and pisses me off that he just left Laura sitting in a hospital bed crying and never came back. You're right, he was the only father she knew. She was in so much pain to be abandoned like this. So this is a certain revenge for you. I'm a divorced single mother living on welfare, trying to help a chronically ill child. She continued, "Listen, my life has been hell for the last 2 years. Trust me when I say that any revenge you might have wished on me has come full circle. The only good thing that has happened to me since we broke up is Laura. If you want to find out more, you'll have to sign up for testing. Here is the contact information and a couple more photos of Laura. Please, just get tested." She sobbed, turned, and ran back to her car. Her departure was slightly delayed as it took 3 attempts to get the engine to start. As she pulled out, I saw drops of oil on the driveway. When I went to get some cat litter to soak it up, I thought long and hard about her request. I'm a 5th place, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I'm not the type to let a child die if I can help it, even if it turns out that she is not mine. No 7-year-old child should be in her place. I was quite surprised at how quickly I decided to get tested. I went in, and it turned out that she was right. Laura was my biological child. The test also showed that I was a close enough match for them to risk performing the bone marrow surgery. I went and planned everything without telling Gwen. I had a private investigator from our office do background checks on Gwen and her parents. It turns out that everything she told me seemed true. The idiot left her alone, even going so far as to get her marriage annulled. For the past 2 years, Gwen has earned money working as an assistant and waitress. Apparently, all her time was spent in hospitals. Medical expenses were enormous, even with Medicaid. All in all, things were looking pretty bleak for both her and Laura. I decided to sell my motorcycle collection to free up the money needed to pay medical bills, as well as child support that I knew I would have to pay. It's funny, I rejected all offers to sell the motorcycles, but when I found out I had a daughter, the decision was simple. I went to the HR manager and surprised her by taking 4 weeks off and asking her to add my daughter to my insurance policy. I could tell she wanted the whole story, but she was one of those people who told the whole world everything that happened in her office. I was especially quiet when interacting with her. I showed up at the hospital with a bunch of papers for Gwen to sign in one hand and the biggest teddy bear I could find in the other. My heart almost broke when I saw a small figure with no hair and a bunch of tubes going in and out of her body. I had to hold back my tears when she opened her eyes and smiled at me. At that moment, I felt my whole world change. I knew I would protect this little girl from anyone who wanted to harm her. I ignored Gwen when she tried to hug me and walked over to the hospital bed. "Hey," was all I could come up with. "Hi, I'm Laura. My mom told me that you were my real dad," she replied. "Yes, it turns out I can help you get better." I brought you a bear," I said. Her eyes became very large, and her wide smile grew even wider. She took the bear from me and hugged it tightly. "Thank you very much." "What's his name?" she asked. "It was just a damn toy. Why did it need a name?" "Well, they said you'll understand what it is when you take it," was my smart answer. "It's Charlie," she said decisively. "Hey, Charlie, thanks for coming to keep me company," she said to the bear. "Thank you for bringing Charlie to me, Julian," she told me. I was going to lose it right there. If you put me in that little girl's position, I would howl with anger and despair. Instead, she was grateful for the stupid stuffed animal. I turned my head a little and caught a glimpse of Gwen. There was fierce pride in her look for her daughter. My appreciation for Gwen, the mother, increased significantly. To hold my own like she did and still raise this little angel was amazing. She was still a shitty wife, though. Laura fell asleep again but held the teddy bear as tightly as she could. This transplant worked better. I knew that if it was in my power to do something, I would do it. I nodded to Gwen, and we went to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. I handed her the papers. "Here are the documents needed to add her to my insurance. I will have a deductible of $1,500, and then everything will be paid for." Luckily, they haven't canceled the existing conditions for the healthcare system yet, so she'll be fine. I also asked them to start sending me bills for her medical care, and I can pay it all off within a couple of months. I told her I wasn't going to mention that I had $50,000 left from selling the motorcycles waiting to be spent. It was amazing to see the tension leave her body for a moment. She looked like the woman I remembered. I had no idea how much weight she was carrying. "Thank you, Julian, for everything. I know you have every right to hate me, but thank you for doing this for her," she said with tears in her eyes. This is what I would have done if I had known, I told her. Gwen, I've assigned a detective from our company to do a background check on you, and by all accounts, you've been an outstanding mother. I'll punish you soon enough for neglecting my daughter, but don't think I've forgotten how you decided to throw away our marriage for a little fun. Don't think for a minute that I won't hold you responsible for missing her first words, her first steps, or her first bike ride. You could have been a great mother, but you were a very shitty wife. She lowered her head, and I could hear her sobbing. Years ago, this would have broken my heart, but now it had no effect on me. I handed her another stack of papers. This is a preliminary custody agreement, I said, causing her to snap her head up. I'm not going to take her away from you, but I want to be a part of her life. I suggest taking her every weekend and 1 month in the summer with alternating vacations, pretty standard stuff. We can take a look and discuss any changes. I'll need copies of her birth certificate. Maybe by chance you have them with you? I asked. She looked at me as if searching for something in my face, but I don't know what. Then she lowered her eyes. I'll have to get them for you. My car broke down, so I came here by bus this morning. Tomorrow, I will bring them with me, she said softly. My stomach growled. It was lunchtime, and I needed those documents soon. Let's grab something other than hospital food while she sleeps, and then we'll get what we need, I suggested. She nodded and wiped her eyes. Great, I thought. I was going to spend lunch with a crying woman. How did I get myself into this mess? The lunch was interesting, to say the least. For 20 minutes, we sat looking at each other, the silence only broken by us telling the waitress our order. I wanted to curse at this woman for so long, and my mind was churning out every nasty thing I could think of to throw at her, but I couldn't do it. I took a deep breath and analyzed why. It came down to the fact that I would have to deal with this woman for the foreseeable future. She had nothing outside of her relationship with her daughter. She made her choice and lived with the consequences. My sense of justice, however perverted, was satisfied at that point. I still didn't trust her or particularly like her, but I wasn't going to hate her anymore. I'm not going to hit you, I said, when the thought occurred to me. She shuddered and looked at me strangely. When you first approached me, you said that I could throw some punches at you, but I'm not going to do that. In fact, I will try very hard to give up my hostility and anger towards you. We have a daughter, and I am not going to poison her life like my parents poisoned my mind. You'll probably never be my favorite person, but I'd rather let go of my anger and make sure our daughter has a loving and stable home, I explained further. Some of the tension left her. I know you wouldn't hit me, Julian, even though I feel like I deserve it. I just want you to know, she began. Stop, I said, too loudly. I don't want to hear your apologies. Nothing you can say will change what you did or how you did it. The most basic truth is that you did not want to be married to me and you wanted a night with other men. You could have told me you wanted a divorce, but instead, you cheated behind my back and then came home and acted like everything was fine. This was not a mistake, it was a calculated action. You are not a victim, and you will get no sympathy from me for how your life turned out. If we didn't have a daughter together, I would never want to see you again. But we have a child, and I intend to do everything to give her the best life. This includes a mother and a father. So, let's have lunch and talk about how we can make our daughter's life better. She looked at her burger and then back at me. We spent the next 20 minutes having a wonderful conversation about Laura and how we would deal with her illness. It was really nice. The area where they lived was, to put it mildly, disadvantaged. I knew they lived in social housing, but I didn't realize how bad the situation was. I parked my truck and let Gwen go out to get the paperwork. 3 guys stood at the entrance to her apartment building, with their pants pulled down to their knees. In this area, I decided not to get out of the truck. Gwen had been gone for about 15 minutes when she came out and walked towards these men. It was such a stupid move. I got out of the truck as they started to surround her. Hey, beautiful, too beautiful to live alone in a place like this. You need a man to take care of you, right? One of them said, entering her personal space. My heart was pounding as I pulled the gun from the holster on my belt. My .357 revolver was replaced by a Glock 19. I know many people think the .40 is better, but I shoot a lot and 9mm ammo is cheaper. Let's face it, I never thought I'd get into a firefight, at least, that's what I thought until a few minutes ago. Now I wasn't so sure. She already has a man who cares about her, so why don't you step away before I ruin you all like a bad habit? My voice might have been a little shaky, but the gun held tight. The guy turned around, and Gwen ran towards the truck. He reached for his belt but changed his mind when he saw that I was aiming at him. The other two behind him were clearly scared, but the leader simply looked at me with cold eyes. If you reach for a gun, I'll shoot you, and it'll just be a scared white guy defending his girlfriend from all the Latinos who come here and take our jobs. They'll probably give me a medal for shooting you three, so let's calm down. My wife and I will leave, and you can return to your business, I said, moving back and keeping the gun aimed at the leader. I got in the truck, turned the ignition on, and before I looked away, I accelerated hard. I heard 3 loud bangs before I could turn the corner and drive away. I ran 2 red lights and got onto the freeway as quickly as possible. After 15 minutes, I realized that no one was following me and I slowed down. My heart was still pounding. Gwen sat nearby, sobbing. "You are not going back to that place," I growled. "What do you want from that apartment?" she asked. "Just our clothes and some dishes and small things," she replied, gaining control of her emotions. "A lot of our stuff is still in storage, but I'll probably lose it next month." "I'll buy you new clothes and Laura new toys," I said. "We'll get things out of storage, and you'll move in with me for a while. I have a 4-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms. You'll take one room, Laura the other. You'll cook and clean until you get a job and get back on your feet. No boyfriends in the house, and I won't bring any girls over. I often go on business trips, so there will be no parties in the house. If I find out you're bringing someone over, you'll be thrown out, and I'll seek full custody of Laura." She looked at me and then lowered her eyes. "I'm not dating anyone, Julian. I haven't had the time or inclination in the last 3 years. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, so don't worry about it. And thank you. I know you don't want us to see a hole in my head, but it will be nice to have a safe place," she said quietly. "You should thank Carlos," I replied. Carlos was my best friend growing up. We were an odd couple, me, a poor white guy, and him, a rich Latino with 2 elderly white parents. We did everything together until he got sick at 16. I visited him in the hospital whenever I could and watched as the cancer ate him up from the inside. He died 2 days before his 18th birthday. Mr. and Mrs. Jackson died 3 years later. There wasn't a day that I didn't envy my friend for the love and support of his parents. I wanted to give that to my daughter. It's too late for me to become a normal adult, but if I can give this to my daughter, then I can tolerate my ex-wife for a while. We took her things out of storage and got her settled in the guest room. For the next few days, I may have gone overboard with Laura's room, but she was my only daughter. Over the next few days, I prepare for the procedure. I don't like hospitals, and I'm sure the nurses deliberately used the dullest needles, but I managed. It took a week in total. Little Laura began to recover after a month, but then it turned out that the transplant did not take root. I was knocked out for another week while they tried again, unsuccessful once more. Although the result was positive enough for the doctors to take the risk of a 3rd attempt, finally, the transplant took root. For months after my last procedure, I met Laura at her new home. And here I must tell the story of how Gwen and I fell in love again. No, that didn't happen. I know this may seem strange, but I saw Gwen as 2 different people. Gwen's mother was warm, loving, supportive, and patient. This is Gwen who took care of not only Laura, but also me. Laura missed so much time at school that we decided to homeschool her to make up for lost time. Gwen handled it all very well, teaching Laura while cleaning the house and cooking dinner. Then there was Gwen, the wife. I could never forget how much she hurt me. Gwen, the wife, was the one who cheated on me and hid from me that I had a daughter. Every time I started to think Gwen was okay, the anger would return. It was terrible because I could see Gwen feeling guilty about what had happened, but I was in no mood to hear anything resembling an apology. After I used up all my sick days, I went back to work. The first day was torture for me, as I missed my daughter. When I left the house, I felt a burning anger and envy that Gwen would spend time with our daughter while I had to work. The anger grew every time I left, and I used it to be especially ruthless in cutting costs on the next project. The boss would be happy with a reduction of 72%. I was able to cut costs by 16% by cutting employee benefits and laying off senior employees. I didn't just fire the workers, the plant was overloaded with managers, and by the time I left, 3 of them had received notices of dismissal. I felt that the plant manager was glad to see me leave. I didn't fly out of the city until the next day, so I went to the 2-star airport hotel where I was staying and hung out at the bar downstairs. When traveling, I never stopped in fancy places. It looked bad enough when I came in and talked people into cutting overhead. Imagine what it would have been like if I had stayed in the most luxurious hotel. As I sat there drinking my expensive glass of whiskey and water, I saw an attractive brunette enter. I'd done this dance before and knew she was probably hitting a couple of clubs in town. She was likely trolling here, trying to save the night. Luckily, I had enough money to cover her price for the night. We made small talk and danced around the topic of pricing. I took her to my room, leaving her wallet and valuables with the front desk clerk. There was a safe in the room, but all she had to do was have a gun or a knife with her, and I would open the safe and give her what she wanted. She was professional enough to tell someone her time and location. We walked in, and I put $1,400 on the nightstand. She looked at me strangely. Our whole conversation revolved around the number $300. It's been almost 6 months, so I hope you'll be willing to spend a little more time talking to me tonight, I said with a grin. The next morning, sitting in my cramped seat on the bus, I remembered yesterday's rendezvous. It was good, no doubt about it, but something went wrong. I decided not to think about it too much, and when the plane landed, I thought about what I could give Laura. My little girl had adjusted well and was set to start 2nd grade this fall. I made sure Gwen had enough money to buy her any clothes or toys she needed. Was she too young for one of those new signs you could draw on? What about a cell phone? She was about to turn 9 years old. Do 9-year-olds need a cell phone? I'd have to ask some friends. Who was I kidding? I didn't have any friends. My assistant had children, maybe she knew. I picked out a stuffed frog from the airport gift shop for my little girl. I loved this new performance from Dad. When I got home, the smell of dinner cooking was divine, but even better was the squeal and tight hug from my daughter. She was wearing a new dress and ribbon in her hair. Mom bought me a new dress so that I can look beautiful for you when you come home. She also says that I have enough hair that I need a new haircut. Do you like it, Daddy? She asked. There was nothing I could do about it. I felt a strong rush of emotion, and my eyes began to water. This little girl was what I was missing in my life. You are very beautiful, darling. This dress is really beautiful, and your new hairstyle makes you look like a princess, I responded, hugging her tightly and kissing her. I have something for you, I continued, opening my bag and taking out the frog. The woman behind the counter said this guy needed a name, and I knew you had the perfect name for him. She almost screamed with delight and looked at him for several seconds. This is Randy. Hey, Randy, let me introduce you to Charlie Bear. You guys will be good friends, she told the toy. She headed to her room, then turned and gave me another big hug. Thank you, Dad. This little girl was great. I looked at her mother, who also had tears in her eyes. I almost lost my good feeling when I realized that Gwen had been hiding this from me. I could have had this continuously for the last 8 years. I dismissed the thought. My mother was cruel to life, and I wasn't going to let the bitterness I felt toward Gwen poison my relationship with my daughter. I put a smile on my face. Gwen must have sensed my change in mood because she suddenly became very depressed. I put a fake smile on my face. Dinner smells good, I tried to say in a normal voice. Thanks, Julian. I found my old batch of recipes and tried to make chicken parmesan just the way you like it, she replied. This was supposed to be a treat, as her chicken parmesan was to die for. I'm sure it will, I replied with genuine enthusiasm. She tried her best to imagine as normal a family life as possible for Laura's sake. I could do the same. Besides, I had to admit that it was nice to have my clothes taken care of and my house cleaned. My daughter and her mother had been with me for about 3 months at that time. Laura was so sweet, and if I had to put up with Gwen, I would. I didn't want her to leave because I knew she would take Laura. I talked about getting primary custody of my daughter, but my lawyer pointed out that given my work schedule and general lack of parenting experience, it would be a long and uphill battle. The girl also needs a mother. About a year passed after they moved, and Laura returned to regular school. Gwen did a great job teaching her not only the facts she needed but also how to study and pay attention. Laura was constantly on the honor roll. I lived in a nice area. My house was clean, my clothes were taken care of, dinner was on the table, and my little girl was the apple of my eye. Gwen and I lived comfortably. She was coming out of her shell and shocked me by asking if she could use the car to try to find a job. I bought her a used Subaru van so she could drive Laura around, pick up groceries, and whatnot. It worked well and had an excellent safety rating. Gwen, I understand this car is yours. I will never use it if you move away, and it is old enough that it will have zero resale value. Why don't I just put the title in your name? If anything happens to me, I will arrange for everything to be handed over to Laura until she turns 18, and then she can do whatever she wants. You should have a car to help her until she can get around on her own, I replied. I saw her start to cry. Thank you, Julian. You've been so good to us, and I don't know why. You should know by now that I wouldn't stop you from seeing Laura. Why are you so nice to us, or rather to me? She asked. I was thinking about how to say this. It was also the first time I realized I was no longer mad at her. I used to hold it in, trying not to show it for Laura's sake, but now I really had no animosity toward her. I took a deep breath and collected my thoughts. My mother poisoned me and my sister with her vitriol and hatred. I didn't want to pass that on to Laura, so I strangled it. Make no mistake, if Laura had not come into my life, I probably would have hated you right up until the day I died. But now everything is different. The short answer to your question is that Laura likes you, so I think we can continue to be friends, I answered. Tears welled up in her eyes even more. She came and hugged me. For some reason, my allergies started to kick in, and my eyes began to water too. It felt good to let go of the anger and pain. Don't get me wrong, the resentment was still there, but it was no longer in the foreground. Laura came down to the kitchen and saw us hugging and crying. She decided she needed to take part in the hug, and the three of us held each other for a long time. My heart burst with pride as my daughter walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Gwen sat next to me, holding my hand, with tears in her eyes. Laura had gone to Harvard and was going to leave us in a couple of months. That was all she could talk about. Luckily, she received a scholarship, and her education fund covered the rest. I didn't want to tell her that she couldn't go to the school of her choice, but I wasn't sure I could afford full tuition at an Ivy League school. Regarding the matter with my ex-wife, she got a job and left home about 6 months after we spoke. Finally, we sat down, and she explained what made her leave me. It was a combination of us being away from our friends and family, as well as having a bunch of new friends that made her yearn for the carefree days. She saw this and took advantage of the situation. As soon as this happened, she decided that she wanted to live a single life again, knowing that I would leave her when I found out she only married him because she was pregnant and afraid of being a single mother. He only married her because his parents forced him to take responsibility. She claims that before the test, she didn't even think that Laura didn't belong to him. I think she lives in denial about it, but I don't think much of it. As for the jerk, sometimes karma throws a good ball that you can just knock out of the park. Our company bought his company. Guess who they sent to check productivity? It gets even better. His dad worked at the company for 19 years and got his little guy the job. Both father and son, as well as 10 other employees, were given travel documents. They didn't contact us for about a month, and then we received all kinds of threatening calls and emails. My decisions were supported by my past practice and performance reviews. They sued my company, but we dragged it out so long that their lawyer got tired of waiting for his money. He shouldn't have treated my daughter so badly when he left, and the jerk's father should never have called my daughter a mistake. Speaking of mistakes, I may have made an important mistake last night. Gwen was sad about Laura leaving and came over to talk. By this point, we were good friends and cared about each other. She had dated a little and found what she thought was a decent guy, but it turned out he was married. I helped her pack his things and take them home to his surprised wife. We started talking and flirting, and the next thing I remember, we were in bed together. I could live with that, lonely intimate between two people who have a lot of history in common. No, perhaps the mistake I made was asking her to stay the night. A variety of questions are spinning in my head right now, but today is about my Laura. Tomorrow, I guess we'll see. What do you think of our story today? It seems to me that this story was quite traumatic for the husband of the wife, as you would not wish anyone to see it. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.